Welcome to Let's Talk Midlife Crisis. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Tracy. We're your go to hosts for all things midlife, menopause, and moments of pure mayhem. Today we have Karen Fabian, founder of Bare Bones Yoga and and the host of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Hi, Karen. Welcome.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be on your show.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for joining us. We're excited as well.
Cool.
I'll just jump right in. So I was actually, this is really funny because I was kind of doing some research on what it is you do and your platforms. And then when I was brushing my teeth this morning, I'm like, you know what? This is really cool. She's like a yoga instructor that helps yoga instructors. And, I think I speak for a lot of people when, depending on your relationship with, your doctor or your therapist, you always, we look to them for guidance, and we just think of them as that person that's helping us, and we don't always realize they're human too, and they need instruction or direction too. And so when I was thinking about that, I'm like, that's really cool that she does this.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Both of you have probably been to yoga classes, but I want to put you in the body and the mind of the yoga teacher. Mm-hmm. Imagine walking into a room with a bunch of people you don't know and being in charge of presenting this practice that's been around for thousands of years, that has both a physical component and sort of a philosophical component. And because of all of what people see on social media, having this sort of mindset or thought that I have to show up in a certain way, and having this sort of attachment to, I hope they like it, which might not even be something that you initially or independently think of, but it's sort of thrust upon you by so many of the narratives that are out there just in the world. And then imagine all of that. And in addition, maybe you have your own limiting beliefs about your age or your weight, or maybe you compare yourself to other people. Maybe you had experiences as a child when you changed schools and walked into the classroom and felt this massive anxiety about being the new kid. Or maybe you have a partner who calls you a wallflower and says, why do you want to be a yoga teacher? When inside you have this passion for this practice that on some level changed you, and you were motivated to take a training program so you could go out there and share it. And now that you're doing that, you're having to sort of face all these challenges and you're feeling all these triggers. So what I just described is not just a story. It's literally stories of yoga teachers that I just strung together for you in like a little package. And this is really a very common thing. But for the students coming to class, they might not realize that or see that, and nor should they. But for the yoga teacher, it can become a real block to teaching in a way that feels easy and fun. And because I know, and yoga teachers know, and humans know, on some level, even if you don't practice yoga, I think most people would look at the practice of yoga and appreciate that's a healthy thing to do. Even if maybe they don't practice yoga, they probably do other things. So let's just call it movement. So my whole mission is to get as many yoga teachers out there teaching in a way where it feels easy and fun. And that, for many teachers, is not how it feels. So that is what drives me to do what I do.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, and like you said, a lot of people in the class don't see that. They don't know. And there's, I have to give presentations for work sometimes, and if I had a rough morning or something happened the night before, and it's just kind of there in my head, and I'm not presenting mindfully, I'm not necessarily present. And so, I think that it's crucial for anybody to understand how to navigate through that and still perform mindfully and enjoy it. Like you said, they're doing this because they feel passionate about it and they want to share that passion.
Yeah.
It should be fun.
And when you just described the presentation at work, which is a really good analogy for, I mean, most people get nervous presenting at work or giving a speech at a wedding or whatever sort of public speaking. It always ranks high as something that's really anxiety provoking for people. And that is literally what you are doing every time you go into a class. But then there's all those other aspects that I shared. And from a neuroscience standpoint, whether you're presenting at work or teaching a yoga class or doing something else where that's forward facing, the more you're thinking about what you're doing, the harder it is to be present. And so as a yoga teacher, you're thinking about the sequence, you're thinking about the cues, you're wondering if they like it, you're thinking about your own limiting beliefs as you walk around the room, and you might think, oh, that person's looking at me weird. She probably thinks I'm not good enough to be here. Or, oh, there's another yoga teacher from the studio here in my class. I bet she's judging me. So imagine now you have all these thoughts in your head as you're trying to teach the class. Now, keep in mind, all of this is relative. Some people experience this on a 10 out of 10. Some people experience it on a 3 out of 10. The people that I work with, because the work I do is both skills-based and mindset-based, they range in terms of the kinds of things we're talking about. But on some level, the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems in the yoga industry is nobody trains yoga teachers on this sort of stuff. It's very skills-based and knowledge-based focused. And my program is driven by my passion for helping teachers move through these mindset blocks they have. And the really amazing thing, and this speaks to what you do in working with women in midlife, a lot of the women I work with are in midlife, is in their on the path to being a better yoga teacher, they actually develop a better relationship with themselves. Because just like so many things that we can do in our life, when we really strive to do it well, we have to bust through limiting beliefs and face challenges in our mind. And so we might be focused on doing the thing better, but when we come out the other side, we actually feel more confident and a sense of accomplishment. And we may have even shifted our identity. That example I shared of the woman whose husband called her a wallflower, that is a true story. And so as we work together in my program, she shifted her identity at the identity level. I am no longer somebody that associates with being a wallflower. And that teaching yoga was just the palette or the template that allowed her to move through that identity and really claim another way of being that was much more empowering.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing.
Very interesting.
That's a lot of pressure on a person. You know, like you said, everyone's, everyone's looking at you, and you have to hope that they like, what you put together for them, and are they judging you? And that is a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And I used to give presentations at work, and but like you had said earlier, we would be up rehearsing, right, for hours upon hours upon hours. And honestly, that made it worse for me. I'm the type of person that just shoots from the hip. So don't try to script me, because then I'm all in my head and I get tripped up if I can't recall it correctly. But it's like, I know my stuff. So just let me be me and let me talk. So that whole getting into your head thing, I can definitely relate with that.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect example that comes to my mind as you share that, because when you think about, like, I'll ask you, and the person listening can answer this question too, more times than not, when you go to a yoga class, is the yoga teacher practicing with the students? So this is a really common thing. Most yoga teachers, and of course, I don't know every yoga teacher in the world, but I've been teaching for 22 years, so I have a good mind on or view of the landscape. And because I've been working with teachers for a long time, this is one of the common behaviors that teachers have. And yet, what they really want is to be the kind of teacher who can walk around the room and watch what their students are doing. But the way they learn the sequence is they write it down and then they practice it at home a million times. And so then they go into the room, and just like you said, they expect a different result. Oh, I expect I'm going to be able to walk around and teach this sequence. But why would you expect that if you practiced it to learn it? And so this is where it becomes a challenge to the vision they have about the kind of yoga teacher they want to be. And I use it as an example that we can broaden, because I know your audience is not necessarily yoga teachers per se, like mine. My podcast is Conversations for Yoga Teachers, so that's my audience. But you can broaden that to anything, and your example is a perfect one. So for the listener, if you want to shift your identity, and if you want to move through different beliefs, and if you have a vision like these yoga teachers of, I want to be the kind of, just fill in the blank, I want to be the kind of woman who can go to a party by my own and feel comfortable. I want to be the kind of woman who can switch careers or start my own business, whatever it is, like fill in the blank, and then start to look at, well, what am I doing to get that result? You know, it's kind of like there's a lot of, because my whole world is steeped in exercise and movement and anatomy, there's a lot of training regimens that they look at the end result of the athlete and the skills the athlete needs to have, and then they retrospectively work to give them specific workout regimens that help them do that skill better versus all these other random things that they could do. So I think that point you brought up is a perfect one, to really just look at what's the end result that you want to get. And maybe you're not actually doing something to help you get that end result, and just shift that, and you might actually get what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think what you have to look at, what is keeping you from doing those things.
Yes.
What's the narrative that you've been living by? Like, like you said, the partner saying you're a wallflower. Why would you want to do that? Why do you believe that?
Yeah.
What's keeping you from going forward or taking steps?
I've done a lot of work studying this discipline called neurolinguistic programming, which is sort of a branch of neuroscience, but it really looks at the mind and how our beliefs really drive our behavior. And in the Essential Guide to Neurolinguistic Programming, which was written by this gentleman, Tom Hubar, he has what he calls the well-formed outcome, which is sort of Stephen Covey-esque, the 8 habits of effective living, right? But in that, in that framework, which is designed to help you get a certain outcome in your life, one of the questions is, what's preventing me from having that outcome right now? Mm-hmm. And so in the example I shared of the yoga teacher who really wants to be the kind of teacher who can confidently walk into the room and just say, okay, everybody, my name is Karen. I'm so glad you're here. Come into downward facing dog. Versus going in the room, unrolling your mat, putting out your notes. Not that there's anything bad or wrong with that, but if you have a vision of being a teacher that does the walk and talk, and you're struggling because every time you go in and you feel compelled to put the mat down, if I ask that person, what's preventing you from doing the walk and talk? Because no one's ever asked them that question before, all of a sudden they're faced with, let me think about that for a second. And many times what they say is, I'm afraid to let people see me. Mm-hmm. And so for yoga teachers, it becomes a way of hiding in plain sight. And it's also, like we talked about earlier, a way to keep the brain, not the mind, but the brain working in that pattern of how the person learned the sequence. So it's not building the skill of teaching without having to do it. I call it breaking up with your practice as the source of your cueing. You have to break up with your practice as the source of your cueing, and just, I do coach teachers on how to do the walk and talk, but that question brings them full face on with what is almost always a fear-based thought. So when I say, or when a teacher says to me, I'm afraid to be seen, I'm much more comfortable on my mat, that allows us to now we're working with the real problem. All the other stuff is surfacey. Now we're really working with the real problem.
Right.
And that's good. That's
Yeah.
how change happens.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crucial.
And I would think that that's fairly common, as you mentioned, outside of yoga as well. I think just, presenting or speaking in front of an audience or a crowd, I think it's a pretty common, I don't want to say phobia, but I think it's pretty common for people not to feel comfortable, right, doing that.
Well, think about how many times do you see a presentation and the slides have so much stuff on them. And as a participant in that sort of presentation, I can't really connect to the speaker because I don't know, am I supposed to be reading the slides or am I supposed to be looking at the person? And this is, even when you watch TED Talks, they do keep the slides really short, but yet there still is. There are slides. So, this idea of, kind of being naked and afraid, so to speak, when you're doing your presentation can be, or you're teaching your yoga class, can be terrifying. But there is, for the teachers that I work with and train on how to do this, it does become a real life-changing skill because in part, from the mindset side of things, they're facing their fear. And the other part is they're building a skill and a different way of relating to their students. And they're realizing, oh my God, there's this whole other world of teaching a yoga class that I never even knew existed. And it's watching them. It's seeing, I call it say the cue and see what they do. Say the cue, because hello, if you're saying the cue and you don't see if it's working because you're practicing with them, because they're not talking. It's not like in a personal training session where it's you and the trainer and you can say, you know what, my hip feels a little weird. They're not saying anything. So the only way they're communicating with you is by their movements, and you're missing all that. But again, I fight the narrative in the yoga industry. I fight all the messaging that they get. I am the counter scenario or approach from a training point of view. And I very much am swimming upstream. There's a whole stream of the industry going in a very different direction. And that's why I use Instagram and TikTok, and I'm really, just very out there with my videos to try to capture teachers and allow them to see, not that there's a right way or a wrong way, but there's your way. For any person, any woman who wants to live their way, that's really what brings us enjoyment and feeling authentic and feeling rewarded in our life when we feel like we're living it our way. But again, just talking about yoga teachers, although you could say it in a lot of different scenarios, when you're in a scenario or an industry or a job that everybody's sort of doing it a certain way, even if you have thoughts that are different, how are you going to make that a reality if no one's talking to you about that? So many of the teachers, when I work with them, they say, how come nobody told me this was even an option? I'm like, well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine they're very grateful for you and how much you've helped them. And I'm sure that once you help them break through and realize that they can do these things, it probably also affects other aspects of their life.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I look at what you're describing, this ripple effect, really as sort of a two-pronged thing. There's the ripple effect between them and their students. And so when the yoga teacher feels more confident and empowered and they go in to teach their class, the people in their class receive that even energetically, but also in terms of the literal, what the person is doing, like we talked about watching them more, maybe offering adjustments, modifications, things like that. And then that person leaves the experience and maybe interacts differently with the people at their job and the people in their home and people in their community. So there's that ripple effect. And then for the teacher, instead of driving home from class and having that narrative in the head, like, I didn't do a good job. Oh, you messed up again. Oh, you said to yourself you were going to walk around the room more and you didn't. You're a failure. Now that person's driving home and they're feeling fulfilled. And so their interactions with people in their home are different. I had this one client, and she said, when we first started working together, every time I leave the house to go teach my class, my husband says, okay, have a good class. And I'm seething inside because I can't believe that he's so chippy and cheery. Doesn't he realize how stressful it is for me to go teach this class? And as we worked together, that was one of the things that changed. When she would leave to teach class, he would be like, hey, have a good class. And she'd say, okay, great. So that describes in part what you're talking about. I mean, these are real, true examples. And it is the biggest joy of my life when I see these kinds of shifts happening in people, because again, it's not just about the yoga, right? It's like, look at any athlete and what they achieve. It's not necessarily just about the game or the tennis match. It's about them as a person and how they are shifting as a person. And I mean, even right now, today and tomorrow, the finals of the US Open are on. For every person watching those people, even the people who lose, the spectators will gain something from watching that experience. So the ripple effect is there as well.
Absolutely. And it's kind of shocking. I've talked with people in my trade, after presentations, I'll give them, good job, that was a great presentation. And it's really shocking to me how many people appear so confident and they do it with grace. And then when you say that to them, they're like, really? Thank you so much. I was so nervous.
Yeah.
What? You're
kidding. Yeah. I mean, everybody sort of has a different way of showing up in the world. And, I think part of it is there's sort of that inner narrative the person can be having. And then there's the sort of perception of the people watching. And I think one of the challenges, especially for women, is that sort of connection between how I feel about myself is connected to how other people feel about me. And I face this a lot, or I hear this a lot, because a lot of the women I work with who are teaching yoga are in their 40s and 50s and maybe even 60s. I mean, I'm 60. And some of them have that feeling like when I go in to teach the class, if I see there are younger women in there, I don't feel like I can teach the class and feel comfortable because they must be judging me. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what I do in that scenario, and this again comes from NLP, is this idea of reframing how they see that situation. And I remember with this one teacher, we had a conversation around this, and I said, do you think it's possible that when you walk in the room, the younger women there look at you and admire you and think, because people that are in their 20s and 30s think 60 is like 100. Yeah. Like, I remember when I was 20, I thought a person who was 60 was easily ready to die. Yeah. And now that I'm 60, I'm like, how did I think that? So I said, do you think it's possible that when you walk in there, you're actually an example of what's possible when a woman is 60? And she started to cry. She was like, I never thought that. Yeah. And see, this is the problem with mindset. Until we talk to somebody else, all we have is our own mind mechanics. And so, it's kind of like that Taylor Swift song, I'm the problem, it's me, or it's called something else, but that one line she has in the song. Antihero is the name of the song. Yes. And that's so true. Like, I'm the problem. Like, I can't think out of this problem because I am the problem. The way I'm seeing the world is the problem. And it takes really speaking to somebody else, not so much so that person can tell you. I mean, anybody who's been in therapy knows for the most part, therapists don't tell you what to do. They reflect back what you say. And I've done a lot of clinical work, so I can relate to doing that. So it's not about telling somebody. And usually when you tell somebody something, they won't do it anyway because it's just advice. But when you offer another way of thinking about something, that might hit home for them and start the change.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love what you do. I think it's amazing.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
And
very
so-
rewarding.
And you have step-by-step processes in your class or?
Yeah,
classes?
so what I did many years ago, long before online learning became popular, is I knew that from the business side of things, I really wanted to reach more yoga teachers with my teaching methodology. And I knew online was the way to go. And because the way that I work with teachers is not just about the mindset piece, it's also about how to build your sequences, how to share your cues, and all of that is grounded in understanding the fundamentals of anatomy. So I had a way to pull that all together and teach it to people, but I wanted it to scale. I wanted to get to more teachers.
Right.
So 15 years ago, I created version 1 of what now has gone through many iterations, which is an online program where I teach people these skills of cueing and sequencing and mindset. And I do it in a group program or a more exclusive one-on-one program. And so that's the way that I share this with yoga teachers. And then at the beginning of this year, 2025, I sat back and I looked at, out of all the people that I've worked with, again, for the most part are women, what are some of the common things that I found in working with them? And how can these things be pulled together into a framework that could really help any woman, even not necessarily a yoga teacher?
Right.
And a lot of what we're talking about here became this framework I call the confidence practice. And it's a 6-point framework that helps you build your confidence, and it's predicated in 6 different pillars. And I can share those with you if you want. I also, off of that, created a 5-day confidence challenge. I can send you the link to that. And it's
Yeah.
a self-guided experience that takes people through different activities they can do every day to boost their confidence. So
That would
yeah,
be amazing. Yeah, please go ahead and send that to us.
Yeah.
And your website, which is barebonesyoga.com, will be in our show notes, but go ahead and send us
Perfect.
those links. And we'll also include those in our show notes for our
Great.
listeners out there. And this is just fascinating. Can't say how grateful we are to have you on our show and to
you.
share this with us
you.
as well as our listeners, because
Yeah.
as you mentioned, I think it goes so much further than just to
Yeah.
yoga teachers. I know Ashley and I can both relate to what you're saying. Certain that most of our listeners can as well.
Great.
So thank you again for being with us
you,
today.
Karen.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps it up for today. Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Midlife Crisis. We hope you got some laughs, a little inspiration, and maybe a few new ideas.
If you loved today's episode, hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. And hey, share the love. Send this episode to a friend who could use a good laugh and some midlife wisdom.
Connect with us on social media at Let's Talk Midlife Crisis and let us know what's on your mind. We love hearing from you.